A very common theme in many Roblox games is the ability to sprint, but sometimes you want to limit how much you want a player to be able to sprint, and so a stamina bar is very useful for that. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make that exactly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to make the Stamina Bar GUI. Go ahead and just add into the starter GUI a new screen GUI, and then add 2 frames into that. We'll just add 1 for now and then we'll duplicate it later. I'm going to rename the screen GUI to Stamina, and I'm going to take this frame and I'm going to take the size and I'm going to change the scalar X to 0.2 and the Y to 0.2 as well, and get rid of the offset, so it's point something 0, point something 0. And then I'm going to resize it how I want to. I'm going to make it kind of similar to how I made this one, like so, and move a little taller. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and duplicate this frame. And as you can see here, these 2 frames are actually on top of each other. The bar has a higher Z index, so it goes on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1 frame and give it a Z index of 2, which is this property right here, and leave the other one at 1. With the one at 2, I'm going to change it to the color that I want my bar to be. I'll make it like blue or something. I don't know. And then I'll rename this to, I'll rename this to bar. And then I'll take the other one and rename it to background. And what we'll do is just go ahead and take that bar and take its size down a little bit so we can see the background. And then take this background, and what I like to do is I like to make it completely black, and then take the transparency and make it like 0.5 or 0.75. It's pretty good. You can easily distinguish how big the bar was before it was depleted. Then I'm going to take the bar, I'm going to set it back to its size that it was, and I'm going to delete my old one, my old bar, and then take these 2 and just move them down. Alright, cool. And that's it for the GUI. Once you finish the GUI for the stamina, you now need to implement a little client local script to listen for whenever the player hits the sprint key, which can be whatever you want. So we're going to go into starter player, and we're going to go into starter character scripts. So this is going to load every time the character is loaded, because we need the character to sprint. And I'm going to input a local script into that. I'm going to call it Stamina Client. Okay. The first thing we need is the service that allows us to tell when input has been placed, and that is the user input service. So I'm going to do local user input service equals game get service user input service. I'm also going to need the replicated storage for in a minute. Game get service replicated storage. Okay, so the first thing we need is when the sprint key is pressed down. So we'll just label that with a comment, and then we'll go into the user input service, and then we'll go dot input began event. We're going to connect that with a function, and the function carries an input when input began is fired. So we'll put function input. Next we'll do if input.keycode, which is the key code of the input, which will tell us what key was hit, is equal to And this is where you go ahead and put whatever key you want. You do enum.keycode dot, and then after this is whatever key you happen to have. There's a whole list right here. All the keys on the keyboard, like A, B, C, are all whatever their letter is. You can also go onto the wiki for key code and see all the available enums. I'll be using E. You can also use other common ones are left shift and left control, and for the controller, button B or button X, or the thumbstick. Alright, going back to our game. If input.keycode is equal to enum.keycode.e, then replicated storage.remote events.sprint. So we need to go ahead and make this remote event real quick. I'm going to place a folder in my replicated storage called remote events. And I'm going to go ahead and place a remote event and call it sprint. And then on sprint over here, I'm going to do fire server. So it's going to send a signal to the server. And then since I'm going to be using sprint, the same sprint for when the key is pressed and when it's released, I'm going to distinguish the two by sending over a little string in quotation marks. And I'm going to put began for input began. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and take this right here and just copy and paste it, because it's very similar for when it's released. I'll change this comment to sprint key released, or ended rather, and then user input service dot input ended connect function input if input key code equals equal to the same one here. Then we're going to fire the same event, except I'm going to send over ended. The last thing we need to do for the client is update the Stamina GUI. Update this one to change over time. It's going to be a replicated storage dot remote events dot stamina update dot on client event. So I'm going to have to implement another remote event. I could use the same one, but just to make it a little more organized, I'm gonna separate the update from the sprint. I'm gonna add a remote event and call it Stamina update, which is what I put here. Remote events.stamina update.onClient event connect function, and then we're gonna receive stamina and the max stamina. And then it's going to go ahead and do, I'm going to get players up here just to make things easier. Game, get service, players. And then I'm going to do players.localPlayer.player GUI. So it's going to go into the local players player GUI. It's going to go into stamina, which is right here, and then it's going to go into bar, and then it's going to go into its size. And then to change the size of a GUI part, you need to use udim with a capital UDIM2.new, and I'm going to go ahead and copy what I have so far, which is what it is right now, 0.2, 0, 0.0510. That's what it is right now. And then I'm going to change this one right here to something in parentheses, and we'll do stamina divided by max stamina. So what's going to happen is the server is going to send how much stamina the player has and how much the max stamina is, And if this is like 100 and this is 200, then it will come out to be 0.5. And we actually need to do times 0.2. You need to do times whatever it originally was. So it's going to be 0.5 times 0.2, and then it's going to become 0.1. And if we look over here, if I change this to 0.1, it becomes half. So yeah, it's very important that you multiply it by the original amount. And that's it for the Stamina client. We're going to move on to the Stamina server. So server script service, enter a new script and call it Stamina server. We're going to need the replicated storage, the players, and run service. So just go ahead and get all of that. Okay, once we've got all that, I'm going to set a few variables for later. We've got the max stamina. We're going to set this to 500. The stamina regen. This is how much the stamina is going to regenerate when a player is not sprinting for every 60th of a second. Whenever the server generates a new frame. Local sprint modifier. This is whatever the player's walk speed is going to be multiplied by when he sprints. I'm going to set that to 1.8. And the sprint stamina cost, I'm going to set this to 5. So every frame while the player is sprinting, he's going to lose 5. Every frame while the player is not sprinting, he's going to gain back 2. And then lastly, we need a little table to keep track of all the sprinting players. So we can figure out who's sprinting and who's not. So sprinting players equals new table. Okay, so we're going to go into players first, and upon a player being added, we're going to connect that with a function carrying over the player. And we're going to do local stamina equals instance.new int value, and its parent will be the player. The stamina.value will be the max stamina, so they start out with max, and stamina.name, so that we can easily find it, is going to be stamina. Every time this stamina value is changed, we're going to do stamina.changed connect. It carries over the property, but we don't even really need that. We're just going to leave it there. And then we're going to do, so every time the stamina int value has something changed about it, we're going to do replicated storage .remote events .stamina update, which is, if you look over here, it's this one we're listening to right here. Fire client. I want to send over the player. We're going to fire to this player's client. I'm going to send his stamina.value, and we're going to send over the max stamina. So it's going to get fired to this player when the player receives it on client event. Oops. He has stamina, the max stamina, and his GUI will update accordingly. So that's it for that. Moving along, we're going to have a function for when the sprint key is pressed or released. replicated storage dot remote events dot sprint dot on server event connect function, and the player we received it from and the state that we were given. Local humanoid equals player dot character dot humanoid. We're gonna get the humanoid for later. And then if state is equal to began, so if this was fired because he started, input was began, then, and then we're also going to do else if state is equal to ended, then. So we've got an if and an else if. Here we're going to do sprinting players player.name equals humanoid.walkspeed. So what's going to happen is we're going to add the player's name to the sprinting players table as a key, and then the value, we're just going to store whatever his walk speed was originally, and we're going to store that for later so that we can restore it back when the state is ended. And then to physically change the walk speed, we do humanoid.walkspeed equals humanoid.walkspeed, what it was originally, times the modifier. And then for when the state is ended, we're going to do humanoid.walkspeed is equal to sprinting players player.name. So it'll go back into the table. It'll use the key player.name, and whatever that value returns, that's going to be the new humanoid walk speed, which is what we set originally. And then I'm going to remove the sprinting players player.name from the table by setting it to nil. The last thing we need to do is add extra conditions here. We don't want to start a sprint if the state has to be equal to began, but also humanoid get state has to be equal to enum.humanoid state type dot running no physics. This makes sure that the player is currently not falling or not jumping or not anything other than standing still or running. And then we also want to make sure that you can't hit sprint while the player is currently standing still. So we'll do humanoid dot move direction dot magnitude is greater than 0. And then for the ended, we don't want to run this if the player is not currently in the table, so we'll do and sprinting players player.name. So to begin, state has to be began, humanoid has to be not falling, and the humanoid has to be moving. And then for the ended, the state has to be ended, and the player has to already be in the sprinting players table. Alright, so we're almost done. We just need to do one more thing, and that is to adjust stamina for each player every frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to do run service dot heartbeat connect to a new function, and then we're going to do for index player in pairs players get children do. So it's gonna get the children of players, and then for every player in each pair, we're gonna do local stamina equals player.stamina, and then local name equals player.name. So we've got this name, we've got the stamina object, we've also got the name string. That's going to be useful for later. So if not sprinting player's name, then So if the player is not currently in sprinting players, which means he should not be sprinting, then if stamina.value is greater than max stamina, so I appear to have put max stamina as misspelt, so I'm going to change it over here. I think that's the only other place we put it. Okay, back to where we were. Max stamina. So if it accidentally goes over the max stamina, it's going to immediately reset it to back down to the max stamina. Else, if stamina.value is less than the max stamina and he's not sprinting, then stamina.value equals stamina.value plus the regen, stamina regen. So if it goes over, just set it back down to the max stamina and it should stay there. If it's less than, we're going to add the regen, and if it's equal to, we're just not going to do anything. So else here, for this if statement, we're doing else. That means the player was in sprinting players table, so he is sprinting. If stamina.value is greater than or equal to sprint stamina cost, then he has enough to keep sprinting. So what we do is we just do stamina.value equals stamina.value minus sprint stamina cost. So he's sprinting, his stamina value is greater than the cost, so we're just going to subtract it and he's going to keep sprinting. Else, if he doesn't have enough, if it's not greater than and if it's not equal, it's going to be less than. We're going to do player.character.humanoid.walkspeed equals sprinting players.name. It's going to be set back to the walk speed that we remembered. We had the table remember it, so set it back to normal, and then sprinting players name equals nil. So basically the exact same thing we did on the ended, we're going to put right here. So a sprinting players could end either by doing ended, or it can end by running out of stamina. And that is the whole script. We're going to have to fix this right here, max stamina. I think that's it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and test it, and let's see how it works. We're going to hit play on the top bar right there. Gonna let it load. Awesome. I'm gonna hit. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold E while it's not moving. As you can see, that does not do anything. I'm gonna jump and hit E, and that should not do anything either. And then I'm gonna run, and I'm gonna hit E, and it's a little bit hard to tell, but I am going much faster. I'm gonna go ahead and just ramp up this sprint modifier so you can see it a little easier. Yeah, going way faster. The stamina bar depletes, as you can see, and regens when I'm not sprinting. I can't jump and sprint, and I can't stay still and hit the key and do anything. So that makes this fully functional. If you like this tutorial, please share it, like it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Feel free to add me on Discord. I have that in the description. It really is awesome when you guys add me and you get to talk with me and maybe get some help on certain things. Until next time, this is all I got, and yeah.